Brilliant. Hello. Right. Welcome, everybody. Here's Danny Goodwin, one of my favorite people in the entire universe, who's here to talk to us about search engine journals content strategy, which was all about not creating content, but updating content, which I love because I'm 100% convinced that that's one of the ways to go. Is that sometimes we create content because we think that that's going to be the thing we need to do, but actually what we could do is come back and look at what we've already done. Would you agree, Danny?
Absolutely. I think it's one of the simplest things you can do. You know, I often say that content isn't rocket science, and a lot of people just want to keep creating. And often, you know, you have all this great stuff already existing, and with just a little bit of love, you can sort of upgrade it and just make it better, help it rank better, help it get more traffic, help it do more for you. So yeah, I'm a big fan of content, refreshing, updating, rewriting, making everything awesome.
So what you're going to tell us today is all about a bit of love for your content, be it old, be it new. Sorry, I have to do the song.
Go for it.
Hello, and we're good to go. Welcome to the show, Danny Goodwin.
You know, you can't beat being sung to, so thank you, Jason.
However badly it might be done.
I feel like I'm part of an elite club now that I've been sung to by Jason, so.
Oh, right, yeah, that elite 150 people, so.
Yeah, that's elite.
Oh, that is quite elite. Right, good point.
Yeah.
Before we start, I'd just like to kind of have a look at a couple of screenshots. Number one is the logo.
Okay.
Search Engine Journal logo. Ooh, yeah. That's me drawing your logo. What do you think, Danny? Is that okay?
I like it. I think it has some potential. If we go with like a whole Comic Sans, maybe for April Fools, we could have that.
Okay, it has potential. It sounds like you're talking to your children. Brilliant. The next one is my brand SERP obsession. First thing I did was look up Search Engine Journal. You can't really see it, but that's a brilliant one. You've got the site links, you've got the Twitter boxes, you've got the news, you've got the videos, you've got the people also ask, you've got related searches. You, as Search Engine Journal, not as Danny Goodwin, have possibly the best brand SERP I've seen.
Ooh. Wow, that's good to hear. Yeah, I mean, it's really, again, just going back to doing all the basics that you have to do. You know, Google tells us what they want, and, you know, you have to look at where you want to be, you know, look at your competitors. You know, obviously we look at them, we want to beat them. And just, yeah, in terms of our brand, we want to own everything that we can. You know, when someone's looking for us, we want them to find us. So,
but that, I mean, basically that's searching for your brand name. And what it shows to me is that you've got a podcast, you've got news, you've got Twitter, you've got questions that people ask around you. You have the perfect brand. However, if I may say so, Danny Goodwin himself has a pretty rubbish brand.
Oh, totally.
There are so many Danny Goodwins. This is the best one I've found.
Okay.
Your Silver Screen Orchestra, and I listened to this all day long today. And it's all this kind of movie music played by Danny Goodwin and his orchestra. That's nothing to do with you, is that correct?
Yeah, that is correct. Yeah, the big one for me is there was a Major League Baseball player who also shares my name. So, and a fun fact, he was the only player in baseball history to be drafted twice by two different teams. So,
right.
Yeah. So there you go. Fun fact that I learned about myself whilst trying to find myself.
Right. Okay. You were trying to find yourself, which is kind of hippie stuff. And you found that you were drafted twice and you're now big boss at Search Engine Journal. I do love your Twitter handle at Mr. Danny Goodwin. And I'd like to put at the bottom of the screen the Twitter handles of everybody, because what I've realized is Twitter is quite a big audience for this podcast. So Mr. Danny Goodwin, please do follow him. Now we're going to get into the how can I say this? The crux, the
meat
of the meat. Thank you very much.
There you go.
And if we show
some
the
words.
screen, there are astonishing figures from SEMrush, which show just what you've done.
Yeah,
you're king of SEO, aren't you?
I wouldn't go that far. We're pretty close. There's some other guy who ranks pretty well. I won't name who he is, but I think you can probably guess.
Jason Barnard.
Yes, we can't compete with Jason, but otherwise.
Sorry, just to be clear to everyone who's listening, I don't rank at all. That was a joke. but Danny, what you've done, I mean, I can see the traffic curve and also the rich elements. You're really, really taking this space, man. I mean, your search engine journal brand SERP shows how strong you are on news, on video, on images. Wow, how do you do it, man?
Bit by bit, really. It's not a thing that you can just do. Everybody wants the quick shortcut. How can I do this really quick? You can't.
Yeah, that's what I was hoping for.
Yeah, it takes a lot of work. If you look back, so I started back in 2017 in July. At that point, SEJ was a struggling brand. It just really needed a strategy. It needed, just sort of a direction. So whenever I go into a place, I want to make them the best that it can be. I have a really high bar for myself, and I want the same for everything that we're publishing. So I try to set the bar really high. There's this old quote that I always sort of live by. It's always chase perfection relentlessly, and in the process you'll catch excellence, or something along those lines. So
can I say something? Sorry, you
go for
excited me about something.
Go for it.
Kind of, I've done lots of interviews and they're saying, oh, do this, do that, A, B, C equals D, whatever it might be. And in fact, it's saying, what do I want to do? Who am I trying to please? And in fact,
our audience. Yeah,
who's your audience? Who is your audience, Mr. Search Engine Journal?
That's the good question. So we've done some surveys on it. It was kind of surprising. We have a really big mix. So obviously we have newbies, sort of people who've been in the industry for less than 2 years. That's one big chunk. We have another big chunk that's, probably the big part is people who have been in the industry for 3 to 7-ish years. That's really where the largest part is. And then we have a surprisingly large group of people who've been in the industry for 10 plus years, and they're reading us a lot. So yeah, it's really diverse. We're really targeting the SEOs ideally, as like our A audience, but we've been trying to also ramp that up to add PPC as a sort of like, if you think you're at college, you have a major and a minor. So we're trying to minor now and really build up our PPC content as well, because I think we've really nailed a lot of our SEO side in terms of content. So now we're trying to, once you've sort of maxed out in one area, you want to move to the next. So that's sort of in the phase we're at now.
But you've just kind of pushed to me 2 different questions, one of which is nail one area and then move to another area, which is what you're doing. And you're saying that basically you're looking for people who are talking and interested about PPC.
Yes.
Because you feel you've nailed the SEO. Do you really think you've nailed the SEO, or is it something you've done a good job of?
I mean, there's always room for improvement. I won't say that it's perfect. There's always room to improve, but I think we've done a fairly good job over the last 3 years from where we started. For sure. I've just seen the growth, and it's all part of, and it's not even just me, obviously. We have a big team of contributors who submit great posts, and you're one of them. It's that old cliche of it really does take a village, and I don't know what part of the village I would be considered, but I'm sort of like the ringmaster.
That cliche? Sorry, I've never heard this cliche in my entire life. You need to be a village. What does that mean?
I forget what the origins are, honestly, but it's just this idea of like one person can't do it all. It takes a group of people. Okay. Yeah, that's sort of the main idea of it.
Okay, so now the question is, forgetting the way you're going in the future, what we've seen is phenomenal growth. And what you've done is not bully or push people like myself to write new content. You've gone back over the old content and said, let's renew it, let's refresh it. And
Yep.
What kind of effect has that had? I think people forget it.
So, so let's go back to just sort of the origins of how this all started, just so you have some background. So,
isn't the origin that you're an absolute genius?
No, absolutely not. I just learned from geniuses. So, the origins actually for this whole plan of refreshing content, I have to give full credit to Larry Kim for back in the day. Yes. So I worked with him briefly on some projects, and not sure how familiar everyone is with his philosophy on unicorns and donkeys. So basically, a unicorn is like a standout piece of content. When you find one, you want to push it as hard as you can. And if you have a donkey, which is like a, really low performing type of post, just forget it, move on. You're going to have a lot of those with content anyway. Not everything's going to be a grand slam. But when you do get the grand slams, you want to milk them for all they're worth. So with that, that's sort of where I was mentally when I came into Search Engine Journal. And, sort of the whole idea of a lot of the things we do are a waste of time. It's like the whole idea of...
sorry, can I just interrupt you there? Yes.
You may. Sure.
I do get that feeling, and I think we all get that feeling is how much of what I do is a waste of time. You kind of feel like you're shooting into some black mass of nothingness.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And nothing ever happens. Now, and there's two questions there, one of which is, when I'm doing that, is it worth plugging away at shooting in now? And the other of which is, when it does start happening, what do I do?
Mm-hmm. So, it's like, just to finish the thought there, basically what we figured out was, for the content that was going gangbusters, we were spending maybe 20% of our time on that and 80% of time on crap, for lack of a, for technical term. You know what I mean? So it's like, we got to focus on the winners. And apologies.
But then you've got these authors who are thinking, am I 80% of the crap?
No. This is all the stuff that happened before I got there. All our people today are great. They wouldn't be there if they weren't. So
right. Okay.
I have a high bar. I don't just let anybody in there. But it's like, once you start seeing what's working, I did this whole analysis when I came in of the content, and I realized that I think it was like the top 10% of our page views came from sorry, I'm saying it wrong, but like, most of our page views came from 10% of our articles total.
Right.
So that means we have like a 90% black hole of all the stuff that is like doing little to nothing for us. So it's like, how can you turn that black hole into something that drives traffic, drives links, drives shares, all that good stuff? And, a lot of the stuff in SEO is not like, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. A lot of stuff is the stuff that gets talked about again and again. You just need to update it. You don't need to just have 50 articles on title tags or 50 articles on writing meta tags. You just need to have that one sort of foundational piece and keep updating it.
Right. Okay. So you're talking about two different things there. One of which is you don't have articles that compete with each other.
Right.
And the other of which is that big black hole, in inverted commas, is not necessarily a black hole because the content isn't interesting. It's because Google hasn't figured out what you're talking about.
Right.
And that's where the updates come from. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. It's like, and it's not necessarily that the old content is bad, though obviously some of it was bad because as things have evolved, like just think about, the stuff you read back in 2004, 2010, it was a different style back then. It's sort of like the way that writing has evolved online. It's vastly different. It's kind of scary when you go back. I've even done this on non-SEJ clients. Yeah. So like you look back at stuff they were publishing 10 years ago. It was really short. It was like one giant blob, no images, no nothing, and really boring, terrible titles. You see this stuff all the time as you're going back and you're like, wow, at one time this made sense, but today it just doesn't, it doesn't anymore.
Can I ask a question then? Sorry, I'm getting a bit overexcited. I mean,
go for it.
I come from the internet world of 2000 where, keyword stuffing, the same color of the text on the background, it all worked fine. I've been through all that stuff. And 10 years ago, I would write rubbish content and it would rank. And today, I can't do that anymore.
Yeah.
And that's what you're saying is you went back on this content.
Yep.
But it's out of date. How can you do that?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's a whole long process. You have to basically figure out everything you have. It's sort of like doing your own content audit. You know, you scrape your site, see what you have, you know, look through analytics, we look through stuff on Majestic for, did this stuff get linked to? It's a whole combination of things you want to look at and just basically figure out, is this, you know, it's sort of a smell test. You know, if somebody landed on my site by some fluke on this really old content, would I be proud of that content, of them reading it? Does that reflect well on Search Engine Journal today? Yes, Jason.
Can I interrupt you? Sorry, you may. You're so kind, because I keep going, ooh, can I interrupt? and that is one of my biggest beefs in the entire universe is we have content, and you're saying, where are people coming from? And if they're coming from Google, they've come from somewhere that is nothing to do with our universe. So number one is you're saying, okay, here's the answer to your question or the solution to your problem, but also here's the context in which we're presenting it, which is who we are and what we do. Would you agree?
Yes, totally. Yeah, you know, you have to think about if they're finding you through organic search, and, you know, probably, I want to say 70% find us that way.
Right.
So, you know, if that's their first interaction with us on some really terrible old content, and they're like, ooh, you know, the site has no standards, they may never come back again. They may be like, oh, yeah, I've been to that site before. It's terrible. And we don't want.
Can I come back 2 steps? Sorry.
Please.
There are 2 things. Number one is, if you don't update your content, your old content is attracting people who will then think you're rubbish because your old content is completely out of date.
Yeah.
And the other of which is, if I update my content, at least Google will want to show it because it actually provides relevant answers.
Yep. Yeah. And I mean, it's not even old content, like super old content anymore. You know, we might have talked about this a little bit privately in our lead up to this, but you know, even the latest Google algorithm update from May 4th, the core update, you know, we saw declines from that. And it's not that the content is bad anymore. It's just, you know, you have to think about, you have more competition now. You know, if stuff gets out of date, that's going to reflect in people coming to the site going, oh, you know, this is all out of date, you know, old images, old information. You don't want that. And Google somehow is figuring that out. I'm not going to say that EAT, you know, is a ranking factor, but I did there was a tweet the other day from Cyrus Shepard. It was like, you know, stop thinking in terms of ranking factors. I forget what his word was. I think he said the lazy question is asking, is this a ranking factor? The smart question is, can this influence rank? And that's sort of my, that's sort of my philosophy too. I wouldn't use the word lazy, but, you know, I like that idea. You know, it's, you know, don't worry about, is X a ranking factor? You know, we're probably never going to know. But just think in terms of, is this good for the audience? And if it's good for the audience, generally that will be rewarded.
But that's the whole for me, that's the whole point, is that we don't know, and probably the Googlers don't really know either.
No, they don't.
Mean, the Googlers are kind of saying, oh, here's what we want as a result. I mean, sorry, this is Bing. I was talking to Frederick Debut from Bing. We had a whole series on your wonderful Search Engine Journal site. About how they perceive it all. And obviously Bing isn't the same thing as Google, but the approach has to be the same, because it's the same audience, more or less. It's the same content, more or less. They're using the same technology, more or less. And when you look at that, he's basically saying, we're looking at what there is out there that can solve the problem, which is what John Mueller says, what Gary Illyes says. I mean, none of this is rocket science.
Right.
It's astonishing how simple it all is. Sorry, I'll let you have a word.
Yeah, and I mean, even I remember Gary even tweeted something like that, like SEOs overthink, you know, ranking and SEO. You know, it's a thing because there's so much out there. There's so many cool patents. There's all this really cool information out there, all these studies. But in the end, it's really just about focusing on your audience and what they want. And I know that's probably like, oh, that's so cliche, but it's really so true. That's where our whole strategy started. It's thinking about them solving problems for them. You know, we specialize in how-to content. People want breaking news at Search Engine Journal. We give that to them.
But excuse me, I don't want to.
You're running the show. You may interrupt me as much as you want.
There are two things. One of which is you guys give breaking news, which means you need to be in Google News. So kind of you're saying, okay, Roger Monty is my fave, and he keeps saying, oh, this is new, this is new, this is new, and that's incredibly important. And then you do these deep dive studies that Dave Davis is a great example.
Yes.
How does it all work? How do you marry those two together?
Oh, I mean, it is a bit of a challenge, honestly, because there is so much constantly happening. It's really just about putting processes into place, figuring out what people want. We do survey our audience. We ask them what they want. That's one of the really simplest ways to do it. We are fortunate that we have a pretty big audience, though, so I know a lot of people can't. But, yeah, it's basically just that, you know, focus on your audience. And it may get boring to say that, but you know, it's like we're all sort of news junkies. We want to know all the latest and greatest stuff. So it's I grew up in journalism as well, so that I think that helps me. Yes, yeah, I actually started in journalism. That was my college major. Did that for a bunch of years before I moved over to online. So yeah. I mean, that's
personal question. What kind of journalism were you doing?
So I worked local journalism at a local newspaper where I grew up in Massachusetts, and it was a great organization. So I learned a lot. That's where I sort of got all my chops in copy editing and learning, you know, how to write, specifically news. So I think that has helped me a lot, you know, making the transition to this world.
Yeah, no, I'm laughing because I actually submit articles to you and you chop it and rewrite it. And you've done Melissa Fash from SEMrush, astonishing job of actually being reasonable in that you correct things that need to be corrected rather than correcting things that are your opinion. Is that a big part of your job?
I honestly don't try to rewrite a lot. Anything I change, I do not for myself. I do it for, I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of the person coming. You know, one of the biggest things that I saw early on with Search Engine Journal is, you click on a story, you'd start it, and then there'd be like 1,000 words on the history of this thing. I'm just like, oh, get to the point already. And that's sort of the thing I've always sort of lived by. And that's why I've always sort of hated the whole concept of skyscraper content, 10 times content. That whole thing really annoyed me because there's so much fluff that gets added. And not everything has to be the most in-depth, ultimate, definitive guide. And it doesn't have to be 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 words and all this. And that stuff just drives me crazy. Yes, Jason.
No, sorry, I'm trying to ask a question. It's like I'm with my teacher here.
Yeah.
But this is, you just nailed one of the biggest beefs I've had over the last 10 years is fluff.
Yes.
Get rid of it.
Yeah.
There's no point. I mean, skyscraper content for the sake of skyscraper content doesn't make any sense. It's what do you need to say in what context for whom?
Yes.
And that's what Google's looking for. And I might be wrong, and I would love somebody to prove me wrong. I can't see any context where I would search on Google for something that is so in-depth that I would need 5,000 words.
Yeah. And I mean, again, going back to, your audience, a lot of people in SEO are kind of time poor, for lack of a better word. It's like, they just want to get in, find out what they need to learn. So that's the philosophy, I guess, if you want to call it. Just get to the point, give them what they need, and don't overstay your welcome.
Can I ask a question then? I mean, we're supposed to be talking about how you rework the content on Search Engine Journal. Did you immediately say, okay, shall we? And what I like is Mark Twain saying, if I'd had more time, I would have written less, which I love. Is that what you did?
Try to. I mean, it's not always possible, but Yeah, I mean, yeah, I've just never bought into that whole idea of more or longer is better. I think better is better, for lack of a better way to say it. It's the content should dictate the length. It's not the length should dictate the content.
Ooh, I saw something from John Mueller about that, which pretty much nails that 100%.
Yeah.
And sorry. So if I come back and say, okay, you came into search engine generally, you said, right, there is some that needs to be rewritten and some that needs to be removed. What do you do with the removed content?
So there's a few ways we've handled that in the past. Typically, it's our sort of main way of dealing with stuff. If we totally rewrite it, we would look at sort of the history of the pages and go, was there any links to this? Did it get any shares? Did it get any traffic? If it had any sort of value, we would 301 the old post to the new post. And one of the fun examples I always use for the site was as I was looking through our content audit, I noticed we had about 6 articles on content audits. So they're basically all competing with each other, and none of them were ranking on page 1. So, one of the things we did, I think maybe in 2018 or 2019, was just come up with a single post and had someone write it. And we published it. 301 redirected all the old posts to the new post, and it now ranks on page 1, and it actually gets some traffic every month. So.
I have a terribly rude question then.
Go
you
for
had
it.
5 posts that we talked about exactly the same topic.
Yep.
You brought them all into one.
Yep.
You must have made a Skyscraper post.
No, it was less than 2,000 words.
Really?
Yep.
How did you do that?
I mean, honestly, for that, I'd have to credit the author, which was Ashley Segura. She did a great job with it. She's a great writer, and she nailed it. I don't. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I'm going to interrupt that. I mean,
okay.
I think we misunderstand the fact that we've got 5 posts that talk about the same topic.
Sure.
And it doesn't mean that when we regroup them all into one, that we've got 5 times the length. It means that we can actually regroup it all together. And Ashley was the name of the lady, if I remember correctly.
Yep.
Managed to take, let's say, 5 times 2,000 and bring it into 1 times 2,000, which really nailed the topic and ranks. Is that correct?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, it's the idea, and I'm not sure if it's John or one of the other Googler spokespeople has said, if you have a case where you're writing 5 articles and you redirect them all, they will recognize that you've done that, and they will reward you if the content's good. So luckily in that case, the content was really good. So yeah, it's just it's the old idea of keyword cannibalization. I know some people don't like that term, but if you're sending Google, 5 articles, which one are they supposed to rank? If none of them are getting any links or anything, they have no way to determine which one's the best for this.
But doesn't that come down to the fact that it's not actually up to Google which one it should rank? You should actually know which one it should rank.
Exactly.
And if you don't, you're rubbish. Which is Danny Goodwin's job as editor at Search Engine Journal, is that you should know which page deals with which topic.
Yes.
I like the fact that you keep saying yes.
Well, you're right. I have to agree with you. But yeah, I mean, the great thing, I get to take a lot of credit for people who do great work like Ashley and so many other great contributors. It's sort of like I just sort of see myself as a coach, and I let the players play and sort of get out of the way and just coach them where they need it, just so they can sort of live up to their strengths. That's really all it is. Like all the stuff I do, I consider minor. They're doing all the hard work of doing this great content writing for us, and obviously they get the exposure out of it as well.
Sure. And then we come back to this idea, I mean, if I may be terribly pretentious, is the blank sheet when there's nothing written is the hardest moment in the entire process. And actually coming in, if I might insult you, and saying, actually, that's rubbish, or that's not true, or we can improve that, is the easiest part. Is your job the easiest part, or is my job the easiest part?
Probably my job.
Well, what I love, sorry, I mean, from my personal perspective with you and with Melissa Fash from SEMrush as well, has been that I submit this stuff and I allow myself to push it a little bit too far because I know you're going to pull me back.
Yep.
Is that your job?
A little bit. Yeah, it's basically, I've always sort of called it gatekeeping. You know, it's like we're like the last line of defense from bad content getting out there. And as we all know, there's a lot of really terrible advice out there and a lot of really terrible SEO blogs. So, you know, and, you know, it's not that we hate them or anything, but, you know, it's a frustration out there. So we don't want to add to that at all. So, you know, it's just, again, going back to having publishing editorial journalistic standards. That's the whole key thing. And, you know, and when I work with people, you know, when I first started doing this, I was afraid I would, you know, bruise some egos or whatever the case may be. But it's really about, you know, just making them look as good as possible. You know, I don't like critique you or any other writer who writes for SEJ because you're a bad writer. It's just, there's always room for improvement, and, you know, just tightening up or, you know, coming up with a new lead or a new headline or whatever the case may be. It's just like sort of tweaking what's there to improve it.
But that's incredibly true for whatever content, we're creating. I mean, whatever we're doing, we're saying, I'm aiming at an audience. I need to be as good as I possibly can. And if somebody can help me be better, that can only be a good thing. I mean, somebody like yourself, Danny, is wonderful, and it really does help. Last question is about the YouTube channel. Search Engine Journal.
Yes.
Not terribly YouTubey, and you're now starting that up, which I'm kind of curious about because you've got what, 20,000 views on a lot of the videos.
Yeah, I mean, it's just been one of those things where when I came on, the first priority was getting the site sort of up to snuff. You know, we were doing a conference, an in-person conference back in the days, you know, pre-COVID, when you could have in-person conferences. And yeah,
we met.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough.
Yes, indeed. So, you know, it's just the case there of, you know, sort of prioritizing what matters to you. We sort of see editorial for us as sort of the fuel for everything else we want to do. And now editorial's in a really healthy and great place, so we can do more things. And one of those things we want to do is more stuff with YouTube. And, you know, we recognize we're about 10 years late to the game there, but, you know, you got to start somewhere, and there's only one way to go is up.
But that's really interesting. It's saying kind of like solidify what you've got, make sure that what you've got is 100% right down the line, serving the audience that you currently have. You correct it, you make it absolutely right. And we're actually ranking on YouTube right now for your name.
Sweet.
Number 2. And what I love about YouTube is it's terribly real time, much more than Google, perhaps. But then, sorry, the second step is to say, what can we do to push this wider? And YouTube is a wonderful example, and it's quite difficult to do. But it isn't so difficult because it isn't actually complicated to make video that is engaging. Would you agree?
I would actually disagree. I find a lot of videos really put me off when I start them. You know, it's always, hey, like me, hey, send me money, hey, right? You know, all this stuff right at the start. It just drives me crazy. I'm gone from those videos. You know,
Tim Schmoyer and you are going to be best friends. He was on last week, and he was saying exactly the same thing. And I kept watching videos to see how can you attract likes, users, whatever it might be. And they all say, just keep asking for it. And he says exactly the opposite. So you and Tim Schmoyer are best mates.
I love Tim already. So that's awesome. Yeah, I mean, no, it's sort of like, it just smells of desperation, you know? I mean, I get that it's the best practice accepted for whatever reason, but it's, you know, if people like you legitimately, then they will follow you. It's not, you know, you can't just like, oh, please, you know, give me a give me a like, give me a follow, whatever the case may be. It's like going on a first date and going, hey, will you marry me?
Right. Oh shit! I did that in Las Vegas.
Oh no,
it didn't work out. Right. Okay.
We aren't supposed to talk about that.
But no, what I do love about that is the fact that if you're saying like me, share me, comment me, whatever it might be, it does smack of desperation.
It does. Yep.
But what you need to do is just make it easy for those that do.
Yes.
And that's the secret. It's saying just make it easy. You don't have to bully people. Is that fair?
Oh yeah, totally. You know, obviously you don't want to annoy people. You know, when I'm looking for a video, I want to just go, one of the greatest is Joe Rogan for me, who I've checked out a few of his podcasts lately. I'm sort of new to Joe, but I like how his videos just start, the conversation's going. You know what I mean? It's like there's no preamble, there's no nothing. It's just like you're suddenly in the room with these two people and they're having a, usually an interesting conversation. And yeah, you just sort of go from there. I hope that's similar to what we're doing here.
I do hope it's similar. Now we're going to go right back to the beginning and say, welcome, Danny. Yes. Absolutely lovely to be here. A quick goodbye to end the show. Thank you, Danny Goodwin.
Thank you, Jason Barnard.
That made the perfect loop. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.